up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast, joined, as always, by the Senator Phil Perry. Haven't spoken to you since the news was dropped of Jerod Mayo's ascension to the head coaching position. As we told you, that's what we expected to happen, and it did happen. Let's dive into this, Phil. What's the first thing on the Patriots / Jerod Mayo's to-do list? What would you prioritize if you're Jerod Mayo walking into a session with the Crafts and saying, I want to get this set?
I would be prioritizing who is helping me run the personnel department. And it seems like they've already settled on that, Tom. It feels as though this is going to be an opportunity for the Patriots to allow Matt Groh and Elliott Wolf to stand on their own 2 feet in some ways and to start making the calls. And if not making the calls, really having significant say in how calls are being made.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bill Belichick's show was truly Bill Belichick's show. And no, he couldn't do everything on the personnel side of things, as he reminded us many, many times before. I can't possibly scout during the season and game, but it'd be ridiculous for me to even try to do that. So while on the one hand, that is true, on the other hand, it didn't stop him from going outside of what some of the suggestions were, even at times, to make his own decisions there. So they feel good about that. I just wonder if they should feel good about that, especially without even going through an interview process, Tom. If you'd gone through the process and you'd settled on Elliott Wolf or keeping things status quo with Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh, that would be one thing. It's almost as though they can't know what they don't know when it comes to personnel, because they're eschewing the opportunity to get to know more about some of these other guys available.
Let's speak to the logic of it, because sometimes when I look at these things and the decision is hatched in analyzing this team during Bill Belichick's reign, he made so many unconventional decisions that I actually ended up becoming trained, for lack of a better word, in trying to understand the logic behind why Bill would do something in a particular way that was unconventional. That's the first job that we engage in. Okay, what's the thinking? And explaining to people what the logic is. The opinion and the analysis of the decision is secondary to what the decision is and explaining why they might do that. So it's different than a sports radio host or the host of a TV show for a half an hour. We first tell you what the logic is. So here's the logic. You have just amputated the spinal cord of this franchise, and all the limbs are flopping around. What are you going to do to get the nervous system back under control? Now, the Kraft family likes the limbs. They think they might work well together. What they want to do is see them perform without Bill Belichick there, because 4-13 in an ultimatum year wasn't cutting it. Here's Robert Kraft last week talking about the accumulation of power that Bill Belichick had and why it was difficult to envision him staying.
In my opinion, he earned it. And it worked pretty well for most of the time. But all of us need checks and balances in our life.
Additionally, Phil, Robert also said this. I'll just read this one. When you have someone like Bill, who's had control over every decision, every coach we hire, the organization reports to him on the draft, and how much money we spend, every decision has been his, and we've always supported him. So in essence, liking the appendages, Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, the organization want to see how Matt Groh operates truly, how Elliott Wolf truly operates, how Steve Cargile operates, how Patrick Stewart operates. How do they mesh with Jerod's vision? There is unbelievable apprehension right now that the Crafts are setting themselves up to become the football overlords. My understanding, they have no intention of bigfooting anyone in football operations. As I've said a couple times now, they know what they don't know. And they're not going to sit there and say that some tight end from Baylor is better than the linebacker that they want to take from Vanderbilt. So that to me, and the instances of meddling that were cited in Seth Wickersham's article, Phil, before I bump it back to you, the 3 instances were: 1, re-signing Jerod Mayo; 2, demanding an experienced offensive coordinator, so no running it back with Matt Patricia. And 3, preferring, not demanding, preferring to see Mac Jones under Bill O'Brien. And my understanding is there was no directive offered to Bill Belichick, you're running it back with Mac. I think it was just insinuated enough. There was no effort to trade Mac Jones during the season. However, at the trade deadline, when there were rampant injuries around the league at quarterback, it was broached as to whether or not to trade Mac among the Patriots hierarchy and brain trust and coaching staff, particularly, who broached it. And they said, go ahead. If you think you can get something back, you're the football guys. So nothing materialized. But the bottom line is they have to figure out into this void who's going to be the spinal cord, right?
Yeah, and is it a one-man job?
Right. But the Bucs got to stop someplace.
How many
Someone has to
vertebrae?
say it's Jaden Daniels.
Does the spinal cord have vertebrae, or is that just a cord? That's a spinal column that has vertebrae. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's discs and all that stuff.
Yeah. How many tentacles do you want hanging from that spinal cord? Because Tom, if it ends
the messages get confused. The more, you got if you're an octopus, you got a lot more to worry about than you do if you're is there anything with one arm? All right. We've gone far enough. The point is made.
An amoeba is a one-cell organism. That's
it's been an amoeba here. It's been a giant amoeba. So that's the first to do, is figuring out what the personnel structure is and where the buck stops. And that should be something that we prioritize in discussing with the Krafts. The logic behind it is they want to see if they have good people in place because they think they might. Now, people say, well, they think they might. $70 million of cap space in the 3rd overall pick and the 35th pick in the 2nd round. You think you might have the right people? Don't you want to find out for sure? I get that logic. I get that argument. I don't blame you. On the other hand, too, I'd rather see him be picking at third than 13th, because you can screw up a lot worse at 13th than you can 3rd. I mean, it's a free shot. It's a serve. It's a Karch Karai set. Just spike it over the net. What's the second priority on Jerod Mayo's to-do list, Phil?
Offensive coordinator. It's easy. Got to get that side of the ball fixed. And now that's going to happen first because you get better players. So again, that's why you prioritize whoever is running the front office. One guy, multiple guys, however it is, and however that works. You are going to need somebody who has final say, Tom. And I wonder if it's going to be the coach, because the coach is the guy who actually has to play the players. But if you have a coach that you trust, if your ownership, which they do in Jerod Mayo, and you have a front office setup that you like, the next most important thing is whoever is deciding what scheme you're going to be running and how your quarterback develops. The guy who is in that quarterback's ear the most, that's the offensive coordinator spot. I don't know who that's going to be. I don't know what system they're going to want to run. But if you've got a young quarterback in-house, it would make sense to me to try to find somebody who's coming from this tree that seems to understand how to develop and coddle, in a football sense,
Nurture
young quarterbacks. Nurture the young quarterback, sure. It's Brock Purdy, it's CJ Stroud, it's Jordan Love to a degree. All of these guys are coming from Shanahan adjacent, if not Shanahan himself, systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there anybody out there from one of those teams that you have a relationship with that you like? Nick Caley, for instance, would be a really interesting name to me because he's been here. He might have a relationship with Mayo and others with the organization, Tom.
Nick Caley was a tight ends coach, correct? Bandied about as perhaps the successor to Josh McDaniels. Fill me in on the rest of the timeline. You've spoken about McCaley a number of times.
Tight ends coach here. Very significant say in game planning was my understanding while Josh McDaniels was here. They sort of delegate third down offense this week. Who's got red zone offense this week? I believe he was last McDaniels was here. He was heavy on the red zone game plans. Now he has since departed. So he did 1 year without Josh. So he did 1 year under Matt Patricia. In 2022, left, coached the tight ends in LA under Sean McVay. So one of the few guys, not sure if he's the only, but certainly one of the few who have worked under both Bill Belichick and Sean McVay. And that to me would have appeal if I'm the Crafts and if I'm Jerod Mayo. And if you understand this system and you understand it well enough after a year abroad in LA, maybe you're the guy to be in that next young quarterback's year.
My priority right behind that on my to-do list is figure out who in God's name is coaching the offensive line, what the standards are going to be, and who we're going to attack in the draft. Because go ahead, take Jaden Daniels in the first round and find whatever whatever wide receiver you want in free agency. And go ahead, re-sign Hunter Henry. That's great. Maybe add another tight end later in the draft, but every resource you can has to be allocated to getting consistent performers who are B- at the worst level players, guys who are durable and can play. If you got to load it up with 5 Ted Karrases, do it. You need those. And Ted Karras was a backup here for a long time. The Patriots have cycled through on the offensive line: Joe Thuney, Shaq Mason, Ted Karras. These guys that they didn't expend any money on to keep. Joe Thuney was a franchise player. The main reason they franchised him was to entice Tom Brady to come back. Didn't work. And he left to Kansas City and he continues to be an all-pro player. But you have to spend. So right behind offensive coordinator and the quarterback whisperer, every single focus in my mind has to go toward the offensive line, or you're just pissing into the wind.
Finding an offensive line coach, Tom, I think, might be on that list as well. We don't know whether or not Adrian Clem will be back. Obviously finished this year with a serious health condition is my understanding, or health issue. And so how healthy is he for next year? Does he want to be back? Do they want him back? I think these are all questions worth asking. You've got to make sure you have the right guy who meshes with whatever system it is that you want to run. That's the order of operations here, Tom, will be very interesting to me. Do you attack the offensive coordinator spot having a pretty good idea of what style of quarterback you want? If you're looking at Drake May and Jaden Daniels, are you saying, well, I could see those guys running system X, system Y, system Z? And then the offensive line coach, in theory, should flow off of that. Unless you feel as though Adrian Clem is already well suited for it and, could change as the offense changes and can adapt, and that will work out fine. But that's the next most important job on the staff, I would say. Maybe 100%. Even ahead of defensive coordinator. I mean, offensive line coach is critical, and it's why you see some of these Shanahan guys just float around the league forever because they know that system. It can be simple on some levels in terms of the number of play calls and concepts, but it can be also very complicated in terms of teaching the techniques and the nuances of offensive line play for that offense. And so these guys, they are well paid and they always have jobs because the offense is everywhere in the league. And you might need to try to get one of those if they're available, if that's the kind of offense that you want.
It's interesting what we're going to witness here in the past decade, at least. There has been more of a, we'll see how it goes. I can't even count the number of times Bill Belichick said that in press conferences. What about that? We'll see how it goes. The urgency level, because the Patriots always believed that they had a certain floor and capability level and they could figure things out going into November, was such that they would slow play the off seasons and not be urgent. And in this instance, you'll have some carryover coaching wise, but you don't have the same carryover in terms of tenor and culture and everything else. So you have to be urgent with things in a way that the Patriots have not been urgent in the past. And part of this urgency has to be shown in hiring individuals, not as fast as you can, so that we got a guy, you have to find the right guy, but it has to be urgent to find that guy. So you don't end up in a situation where, as we just were 18 months ago, with maybe it's Matt Patricia calling plays, maybe it's Joe Judge, and Joe Judge is holed up trying to prepare for play calling in his office and practicing, and Bill might do some. We'll see how it goes. It didn't go great. And it certainly didn't help this past season, moving back and forth between coordinators, and it certainly didn't help the quarterback. So there has to be a priority, has to be that the Crafts have to instill is a sense of empowerment to the coach, empowerment to the staff, and we're hands off. Bill went 5-11 his first year, and they had good friggin' players. We have more resources than Bill did when he took over, but we have way fewer excellent players than Bill did. So we're going to let these guys work it out. It's a tough spot for Jerod Mayo, which brings me to my next piece of the to-do list, and I'll let you run with this. Finding your team. Who's on your team? Who's rowing in the same direction? Who from the franchise, if people are going to say to Greg Bedard that now seems like Bill's rubbing some people the wrong way, well, those might be individuals who are not going to look forward to working with you. So finding those individuals and saying, we're probably at a divergent path here. See ya. Or that individual saying that to Bill, to Jerod, and then going with Bill wherever he goes, which we'll get to in a moment. But I think that is incredibly important because I've used the word again. People are sick of me saying it. They throw it at Machiavellian, the cloak and dagger behind the scenes, behind the curtain operations that go on here have not been healthy. And they've been going on since Bill got here. This entire franchise in 2000 was founded, the Bill Belichick run, not the franchise, was founded on kind of the loophole finding, double dealing. I'm going to jump out of this contract and into you. And it worked. There was a lot of that throughout the years. And I think that they need to move forward from a few less of the backroom machinations and the time devoted to that and worrying about effing with people and more towards just do the football. More urgency on the football, less on effing with people.
No question. And my guess is Jerod Mayo already has a good idea of who his team is and the people that he can trust, but it is a real question, especially when you're looking at maybe some significant changes on your coaching staff, especially in the offensive side of the ball. When you haven't been anywhere else, what is his network? And are there guys that he likes and he's talked to a few times and he appreciates their football philosophies and what they believe in? But does he really know them? How well does he know them? Are these long-standing relationships or these relationships that have occurred because of, for instance, something that happens a lot, Tom, you and I both know, in the coaching world and in the player world as well. Well, I know this guy because, we share an agent or our agents are out of the same office. And that could, I'm sure, result in some great friendships. But, trust is going to be key. And I think it's part of the reason why we're hearing from Albert Breer, that Steve and Brian Belichick have been offered jobs to stay in New England. I think Jerod Mayo trusts those guys. We know he has a great relationship with Steve in particular, which I know has impressed Tom people in the building there at One Patriot Place over the course of the last 12 months or so, as you would imagine, some awkwardness developed between the head coach and Jerod Mayo because of Mayo's status as the quote-unquote heir apparent, dubbed such by Robert Kraft. So
and contractually strapped into that chair as well, which I wonder, Phil, quickly, do you think the Krafts made a misstep in writing that into Gerod's contract instead of just saying, you're our guy? Or I don't know, because I haven't asked him or had the opportunity to. Did Jerod demand that? I want to be named the heir apparent. I would have resisted that, I think, just because it set up the landscape. But again, the landscape was such that, and I was told this, look, Jerod wasn't supposed to succeed Bill until Bill decided he was done. Nobody expected 4-13. When Bill was done, that was fine. He goes 12-4 in 23 and 12-4 in 20. Well, there's more games than that. 12-5 in 2024. And wants to keep coaching. They're not going to blow Bill out. It's the 4-13 that muddied the waters. But I still wonder how the written aspect of Gerod's ascension impacted the mood. And did it change their relationship, Phil?
And I wonder if it did, because I do think their relationship was more distant this year than it had been previously. Did that impact the product at all? Is there a
See, I
lack
look
of
at the defense and I'm
communication
like,
that really impacted the football?
here's the thing. I look at the defense and I'm like, well, how could you say that Jerod Mayo's defense hurt the offense in any way, shape, or form, given the performance that it put out there? I guess the only way that it could impact it would be if there was a perception among offensive folks that defensive players, whether it be Devon Godchaux, Jabril Peppers, or folks on the coaching staff, are like, you got to help us out. You guys suck on offense. Which, over the course of the season, they did a pretty good job bottling it up. But if they're hair trigger on the offense and they perceive that to be the case, I could see that being something. Well, they wouldn't mind as much if Jerod wasn't the heir apparent. Him pointing
That's a
out
good
that
question.
the sky was blue.
I wonder if that's true. I wonder how many players were even aware of it. You know what I mean? Of Jerod's contract status. Now, Bill Belichick, my guess is, was aware of it. If not initially, then eventually.
Yeah, he was from the outset, is my understanding.
From the outset, okay. And so then I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, like, if he's got a great relationship with Steve Belichick and everybody in defense likes Jerod Mayo and is playing for Jerod Mayo, and they like Bill Belichick simultaneously, does it really matter? It is hard to look at it and say, well, if Jerod and Bill didn't have the best relationship that they've ever had this year in 2023, then that led to the defense's downfall, and that led to the overall team's downfall. But that's not what happened. It's just not what happened. So I don't know if it's a misstep. Honestly, if they thought they were at risk of losing Jerod Mayo, Tom, and they think he's a special head coaching candidate, then no, it wasn't.
Yeah, because if Bill goes,
be damned. I don't care. I wouldn't care. I would not care if I'm Robert Kraft if Bill Belichick is pissed.
If Bill goes
Just
11-6,
do a better job coaching the team.
If Bill goes 11-6 and Jerod comes up and he gets an opportunity to go to Carolina or wherever, and he takes that job, now you have a 72-year-old head coach who you still don't get along that great with on the day-to-day, and another successor has gone out the door. So I see their logic. Again, I like to look at the logic. I got to jump out of here in one quick second, but I do want to mention this because we'd be remiss if we didn't detail a little bit about Bill Belichick's next landing spot. And it's interesting when you look at potential places that could have opportunities. We already know that the Chargers, Commanders, and Raiders have opportunities. Speculation is rife that the Cowboys and Eagles may as well. Just to remind folks, the Patriots lost to the Eagles 25-20, to the Cowboys 38-3, to the Raiders 21-17, to the Commanders 20-17, and to the Chargers 6-0. And if the Giants want to blow Brian Daboll out of there, they lost to them too, 10-7. Are teams chasing a Bill Belichick that is still Michael Jordan Bulls or Michael Jordan Wizards?
I think he's closer to the latter. But I don't think teams understand that, Tom, or maybe they do. And is the fact that he's only had one interview to this point with the Atlanta Falcons, is that an indication of that? The Chargers might have looked at it, but they saw what happened with a young quarterback there, and they just invested a lot of money in Justin Herbert, and so they want to make sure they've got somebody who's got a little bit more of an offensive background. Maybe the Raiders feel the same way. It seems like they're very interested in Jim Harbaugh. Other side of the ball. Worked with young players for a long time.
Jim Harbaugh is the belle of the ball compared to Bill, maybe because their seasons ended in vastly different ways. But it is interesting to watch, and it will be interesting to watch how Bill fills out his staff, won't it? Does Steve and Brian go there? Or do they say, man, we got families here. We're comfortable, Dad. We like Jerod, and we like coming to work here. It's a tough spot for those guys. I got to put a cork in this because I have an appointment and you have an appointment to get to Needham. We have quick slants tonight. We'll rejoin then. And then obviously the Mayo press conference unveiling tomorrow, and we'll be back at you on Thursday. Phil, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye, people.